When the lawyer stood up and read the will, I was shocked. He gave the house, the entire fleet of cars, the car company, and $12 million to our daughter-in-law. I got our summer residence in Kansas City and his personal belongings. He led an ascetic lifestyle. What things could I get after his cremation? A toothbrush, a sweater, and a photo album. He has a daughter and a son, but he didn't even mention them in his will. Why? If I constantly had petty arguments with the children because they didn't fight with their father. You want to know the cruelest part? I wasn't even surprised by the selfishness swirling around me just by its geometry. Mom, you can afford it, he'd say, slipping my credit card out of my wallet with the same fingers he used to pinch my cheeks when he was 6. Deliveries of emergency electronics started landing on his doorstep. Cash advances evaporated into the giggling throat of the same bartender who called him big spender while his wife, my apparently golden daughter-in-law, filed her nails and congratulated me on raising such a generous man. My boy had turned into a storm drain. Everything I poured in vanished. Nothing clean came out. If I sound angry, it's because I am. But don't confuse anger with helplessness. I'm a woman who taught herself to bleed the radiator, balance a ledger, and bake a lemon chess pie that makes angels cuss. I'm not a damsel. I'm a demolition expert whose fuse is finally lit. The will was the last stone on a pile that started 6 months earlier, the day I forgot my passport. Don't laugh. I know where it is now. Top drawer under the good scarves. But that morning, I was halfway to the airport for a long-coveted beach week, my first vacation since the kids were in braces, when my stomach did a somersault. Passport. I turned around, cussing at myself like a sailor with a crochet habit, and slipped back into the house quietly because I didn't want to startle the dog. That's when I heard her voice, my daughter-in-law, in my kitchen, on my phone. I'm begging you, she hissed, low and urgent. Don't tell anyone. I'll pay, I swear. Shut up. He must not know. Just not now. Let this DNA test be our secret. I didn't breathe. I could hear her pacing, heels clicking the tile I scrubbed, could almost feel the swish of her ponytail I braided during family lake trips I generously financed. I'll handle it, she whispered, then hung up and, like a fox, slid my phone exactly back where she found it. I eased the front door open and shut, loud enough to sing my own arrival. Forgot my passport, I chirped, brushing past her. She smiled like a dentist's poster. We'll miss you so much, she lied smoothly, pouring me coffee into the mug my husband used, the one I'd told her not to touch. She'd been kind to me for years, kind like fresh snow that hides a ditch. That call lodged in my chest like a peach pit. DNA test? Secret from whom? He must not know? Which he? My son? My husband? For a week on that beach I never visited, I conducted a naval operation from the guest room, substituting salty breeze for chilly logic. I called a detective, Marcus Webb, retired cop, good at finding what people collected and what they hid. Follow her, I said, and he did, to the gym, to yoga, to brunch, to a boutique where a woman with a ponytail can spend a mortgage payment on a purse. She took long walks. She had coffee with her book club. She attended charity auctions and pretended to know the painters. She did not, in the eyes of Marcus's lens, cheat on my son. Then what's wrong with my radar? I asked the ceiling at 2 a.m. while my husband snored softly on the pillow beside me. He had started forgetting nouns, little lapses so minor you could tuck them under a napkin. Pass me the the hand fork. He meant the spatula. Your car's in the holding garage. He meant the driveway. I told myself it was age. The doctor called it a cluster of neurological quirks and adjusted the meds until my husband smiled more than he blinked. He insisted he was fine, and I, the fool with the tidy hair, allowed the meds to be the evidence. Still, I watched her. I became the NSA of one woman, cameras on the porch, trackers on the cars I owned and the car she drove, software on the home Wi-Fi that logged every device like a nervous bouncer. The detective brought me nothing. No motel hours, no borrowed shoulders, no lipstick on collars, no gotcha. My instincts screamed, but the courtroom of proof was empty. Meanwhile, my son perfected the harassment of a man who had learned that mother love is a renewable resource. He showed up unannounced to borrow cash, left with heirlooms to keep them safe, kept receipts for things bought on my dime, and returned on his feeling. When I said no, he played the violin of guilt. You never supported me the way you supported Dad, as if applause for a grown man were a line item in my budget. When I changed my PIN, he pouted. When I pulled the plug on a temporary loan, He called me a cold woman who didn't want her grandson to have basic opportunities. Funny, his definition of basic always came with chrome rims. I would have chalked it up to a family drift, a river-changing course over years if not for the day my husband collapsed in the garage, soft as laundry. He died 3 weeks later, complications layered on complications, and the women brought casseroles so thick with sympathy the spoons stood upright. My daughter-in-law arranged flowers with the confidence of a woman who expected to be consulted. She greeted mourners and stationed herself between me and everyone who might ask me a question I wasn't ready to answer. She took charge of the urn, for safekeeping, she said, patting the box like a kitten. Until we decide together. Together. Such a busy word. The day after the funeral, my grandson climbed into my lap with his sticky hands and waved a toy truck at my face until I laughed. He is beautiful. Any child with dimples is an argument for mercy, and he has my husband's eyes. I mean the exact shade and shape, like small coins minted from the same press. It knocked the wind out of me the way truth does when it's rude enough to arrive without an appointment. I stared at his irises and heard again, "Let this DNA test be our secret." If you've never looked at a child you love and seen a map of someone else's geography, pray you never do. The room tilted, then righted itself because I am not a woman who faints. I am a woman who files. I went hunting not in drawers, but in the pattern of 7 years' worth of family photos. The year she married my son, she and my husband developed a hobby of standing to close-in pictures. The following Christmas, there's a snapshot of us in matching sweaters. She's on the end, he's on the other end, but their bodies tilt inward like iron filings drawn to a magnet. 2 summers later, they're laughing at something only those to share. The ring on her finger is my son's. The secret in her smile is not. I wanted to throw open the urn and let the ashes taste the trash, but she'd taken that too. "We'll keep him at my place for a while," she said sweetly, as if a husband were a nephew's dog. I nearly snarled. Then the will arrived like a storm warning. The reading was swift and surgical. The lawyer barely looked at me. My daughter-in-law folded her hands at the edge of the polished table like a student who'd already read the test. When he spoke the words that stripped me of house and keys and the company I helped sandwich with contracts and creditors for years, she did not blink. Neither did I. I stared at the mahogany paneling and counted to 30 the way I used to when the kids were little and I needed time to choose grace over shouting. After, in the hallway, she hugged me hard enough to bruise. "You'll be comfortable," she cooed. "We'll take care of you." She might as well have patted the top of my head. I thought of my husband's misfiring memory, of signatures in a hand that had begun to tremble, of the medication that smoothed his anxiety the way frost smooths blades of grass. I thought of the doctor who'd refused to meet my eye at the funeral, and the way he later told me politely to take my questions and go home. "Medical confidentiality," he said, gentle as a closed door. So I went home, to my Kansas City oven box and the 3 things of his I had left: toothbrush, sweater, album. In the sweater pocket, I found a scribbled appointment card, 3 months old neurology consult, decision-making assessment, the word I couldn't ignore, capacity. That night, the grief turned to geometry again. If my husband had been losing nouns and hiding that fact behind pills, and if the will had been updated during those months, if the daughter-in-law who pressed herself into his orbit had an interest in being near the pen, then maybe the story wasn't about a faithful daughter-in-law at all. Maybe it was about a woman who'd been sleeping with a man for 7 years, my man, and had finally positioned herself as heir by marrying the son. I didn't sleep. I made lists, dates, names, texts, invoices, photographs of bracelets and hands brushing shoulders, screenshots of calendar entries I recovered from the family iCloud my son never learned to lock, security logs with 2 cars in the driveway on nights when one should have been out of town. A detective could not catch her cheating, because she was not cheating on her husband. She was cheating on me. By dawn I had a plan, and it wasn't the petty revenge my rage wanted. No ash scattering, no smash and dash. It was bigger. I would challenge the will. I would prove that when those papers were signed, my husband did not understand what he was doing, and that the woman who whispered into his ear had more than dinner recipes to share. The doctor wouldn't speak fine. There are other mouths, pharmacists, nurses, the neighbor who wondered why the lights were on in the workshop at a friends who heard him forget the name of the company he founded, the notary who watched a trembling hand, the investment banker who suddenly changed beneficiaries like a man changing shirts. I dialed the doctor anyway, trying one last time. "I can't discuss a former patient," he said. "Even if he's deceased, His voice softened. I am sorry for your loss. Click. I stared at the dead line, then at the grandson's eyes in a photo on my mantle. My son still loves his wife. He's lashed to her like a canoe to a dock in a storm he cannot see. He knows nothing about her betrayal. He knows nothing about his grandfather's. If I go straight for exposure, I scorch the child. If I wait, I lose everything. That's when the email pinged. An old account of my husband's, long neglected, synced to my tablet. One unread message, a draft never sent. Subject line, change of will terms, 2 lines in his voice, clipped like a man ashamed of a decision. Move assets as discussed. Keep S, protected. S, protected. Which S? I read it twice, 3 times, feeling the old familiar burn of something hardening into purpose. Then I opened the attachments and found a scan of an appointment confirmation from the same law firm, stamped 2 weeks before the seizure that took him down for good. Oh, sweetheart, I thought, not kindly. You tried to make your sins neat. You forgot who taught you neatness. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, and wrote at the top, grounds, underlined twice. Beside it, in bigger letters, proof. I made columns, dates of lapses, prescription refills, photos, texts, witnesses, financial oddities. And then, on a new line, the only word that mattered, motive. My phone buzzed again. A text from my daughter-in-law, chirpy as a morning show. Hope you're settling in. Let me know if you need anything from the house. We're doing a deep clean. Love you. I smiled, slow and sharp, and typed back, no need. I have everything I require. And I do. Because tomorrow I'm going to visit someone who never says no to me and never learned how. My son, he's going to hate me for what I'm about to do. Maybe now, maybe later. But love that isn't willing to fight isn't love. It's posture. He thinks I'm a victim. He thinks I'm old. He thinks kindness is weakness. Bless his heart. He's about to learn what a mother looks like when she stops setting the table and starts setting the terms. I didn't knock at my son's condo. I used the key I paid for and the spine he got from me. He stumbled from the couch in a t-shirt advertising a beer he couldn't afford and a conscience he didn't own. The place smelled like hop regrets and air freshener, the way bachelor dens try to apologize. Mom, he did that guilty blink I taught him when he was 8 and tried to lie about homework. He is 32 and it still fits him like a cheap suit. We're taking a drive, I said, and the tone brooked no argument. I scooped his car keys from the bowl by the door and tossed him his shoes. You can keep the sunglasses. They make you look serious. He muttered something about needing coffee. I supplied a to-go cup from the cardboard tray I'd brought, because I am nobody's fool and everybody's logistician. On the ride, he scrolled his phone, practiced being irritated, and asked twice if this was about money. No, I said lightly. This is about arithmetic. He groaned. Is this because of the will? I told you. We'll figure something out. Jess, he stopped himself. Used the formal name. Jessica, she says she'll help you with the transition. I bet she does. I took the long way, past the law firm. He didn't notice me look. Your wife is a very generous woman with other people's chips. Mom, darling, I let the word cut and comfort at the same time. When you were little and we played Monopoly, do you remember what you used to do with the community chess cards? He squinted, sipped his coffee. If I didn't like what I got, I'd put it back. You'd slide it to the bottom like it never happened. I turned into a parking lot. He frowned at the building. Why are we at a bank? Because I'm your mother. I smiled. And I'm going to make you mad enough to remember me when you're old. Inside, the manager, an old church acquaintance with an appetite for pound cake and gossip, led us to a private office. I laid out my folder, the yellow pad with my neat columns, and the small stack of transactions where my son and his wife treated my accounts like a petty cash drawer. Some were authorized in sleep-deprived moments. Others were misunderstandings that never accidentally flowed in my direction. I slid a page across the desk. Close the joint card, I said. Remove your access to my online portals. Freeze any automatic transfers to your temporary project fund. I looked at my son. You will thank me later. He leaned back. You're punishing me because Dad didn't leave you what you. Stop. My voice was too calm to climb. I am protecting you from the consequences you are too tired to imagine. Jessica is not a benevolent fund. She is a weather system. You don't see the pressure until the roof peels off. Jessica's been nothing but good to you, he snapped. For 7 delicious years, I said, and watched the words hit the air like plates. His eyes narrowed. What? Sign the forms. I tapped the line. Then we'll talk. he signed, mutiny simmering behind his pupils. Fury looks like youth until it doesn't. We drove to a diner afterwards, the kind with waitresses named Dot and pancakes the size of steering wheels. I ordered for him because I knew he'd forget to feed himself during a fight. When he started in, I held up a hand. There will be a time when I tell you everything, I said. Today is not that time. Today I need something else. His laugh was ugly. Money? Your passcode. He choked. Absolutely not. Not to your phone. I lied smoothly. To your cloud. Mom, that's worse. I'm not going to read your texts, I said, meeting his eyes so he knew that I absolutely could. I need to confirm the date you and Jessica adjusted your life insurance beneficiaries. I need to see a shared calendar entry from 6 months before your father died. There is a meeting I think you forgot exists. I buttered my toast. And I need access to your home security clips from the week of your father's collapse, because your system pinged mine and I want to see why. He stared at me, at the toast, at the woman who diapered him and now demanded his digital underwear. He shook his head slowly. You're going to ruin my marriage. I'm going to save your life. I set down my knife. And our grandsons. If you want to be angry, be angry. I give you permission, but give me the passcode first. He did finally, not because I wore him down but because I let him choose to be a good son in a room where he'd only been a hungry man. He scrawled it on a napkin. I tucked it away and kissed his temple like I used to when he fell asleep in the car. He flinched, because men hate being loved when they're wrong. Back home, I logged in with a hand that didn't shake. I wasn't looking for romance. I was looking for infrastructure. Calendar notifications told the story my heart already knew. The capacity assessment appointment, the call with the lawyer, the day Jessica dropped off paperwork at my husband's office with a smiley face. The insurance portal showed a last-minute pivot beneficiaries adjusted in a flurry the same week his prescriptions doubled. The camera footage from my son's porch revealed 2 late-night visits by my husband, the man who never drove after 9, and one by Jessica at dawn with a folder and her hair in a knot of efficiency. I took screenshots, I printed logs, I dated them in blue ink like a librarian with a grudge. I didn't need the doctor's words yet. I could build a scaffolding of everything around them. The pharmacist who filled the anticholinergic cocktail that fogs a mind, the nurse who witnessed the handshake that couldn't hold still, the notary who saw the squiggle pass for a signature. I called the pharmacy. We can't provide details, the tech said, sweet with policy. Of course not, I replied. I'm calling to thank your manager by name for her patience when my husband had trouble recalling his date of birth. Which day was that? I want to send a note. People want to be appreciated. She told me the date. I wrote it down. Then I called the notary listed on a scan in the draft email. Lovely to speak, I purred. Just confirming you witnessed signatures on the 17th for a gentleman recovering from a seizure? My lawyer wants to make sure the stamp number is clear. She confirmed the stamp number, apologized for the tremor she remembered. Poor man, he looked so tired, and I thanked her with the kind of gratitude that loosens tongues. Pieces slid into place the way a secret desires to be discovered. The neurologist would not discuss his patient. Fine. I had the breadcrumb trail. Capacity queried. Will changed. Signatures witnessed under the shadow of meds that turn a sharp mind into a pane of frosted glass. Add Jessica's cheerful habit of helping with paperwork and you get a picture a jury would recognize even if blindfolded. Still, one thing throbbed like a tooth. The DNA test. I called Marcus, my gumshoe with the unflappable eyebrows. I need you off her perfume trail, I said. We're switching to paper and blood. I'm listening. Find me the lab she uses for anything. Boutique genetic services, postpartum panels, ancestry fun. Follow her credit cards for subscriptions. Look for shipments labeled with medical euphemisms. Find me a cousin who asked too many questions. And Marcus? I dropped my voice at a steel he'd learned to trust. If you have to lean on a pilot's buddy to ask where Jess got her prenatal vitamins, do it. Understood. By afternoon he had a lead, a boutique clinic where women with money and nerves go to whisper into spec tubes and buy certainty wrapped in privacy policies. Nothing shady, he said, but their janitorial staff is underpaid and their receptionist posts everything on a personal blog. If you feed her a compliment, I'll bake, I said. While the dough chilled, I drove to see the attorney the church ladies recommended, the one who made 3 overconfident men cry on a Thursday. Her office was crisp as a white shirt, and she had hands like a surgeon and eyes like a judge. I laid my files out like a picnic and told her the story, omitting none of my ugliness and none of their charm. Undue influence, diminished capacity, she said, ticking boxes like rosary beads. We'll need a motion to freeze assets, at least the business and liquid accounts pending the contest. We'll subpoena the medical records. He can cite confidentiality, but a court can order a limited release for the relevant dates. We'll depose the notary, the banker, the pharmacist, the law clerk who calendared the will change. We'll request phone records for the week in question. If she used your husband's devices to orchestrate this, it will show. Do it, I said. Do it all. She leaned back, studied me. You're not crying, she observed. I ruined my mascara at the funeral, I said. I prefer dry eyes in court. She smiled slightly. Good, you'll need them, and you should anticipate retaliation. I nodded. My son is already trying it. He's been removing items from my house. I described the harassment, the cajoling, the withdrawals, the thinly veiled threat of withholding my grandson if I didn't play nice. She kept notes the way a hawk keeps watch. We can file a protective order if it escalates, she said. In the meantime, document everything. Save every text. If he shows up angry, call the police, not me. And Miss Marshall, she used my married name like a gavel. No vigilante stunts with the urn. Judges are allergic to theatrics. I am too, I lied. Mostly. On the way out, I passed the receptionist who wore eyeliner like a promise. We'll be in touch, she said. And Miss Marshall? Bake something for us too, after we win. At home, I made 2 deliveries. One to the clinic receptionist, a pecan pie and a smile. And one to my own front door, new locks, a camera with a microphone, and a doorbell chime that sounds like a hymn. When my son texted at midnight asking to borrow the silver chafing dish for a thing, I replied with a photo of a police report template and the words, "Not tonight. Love you." The next morning, Marcus called. Bingo, he said, his voice like a grin. Clinic confirmed she had a family verification panel done 7 months ago. They won't give me names, but a friend of a friend says the sample labels used initials only. GM and arm. My stomach went cold in the useful way. Jessica's initials. My husband's initials. Results? I asked. Not over the phone, he said, but the receptionist blogged a story about a beautiful young mom-to-be who cried in her car for an hour after reading her results. Timestamp lines up with the day your daughter-in-law missed book club and the day your husband forgot the word Wednesday at dinner. I hung up and sat, very still in my kitchen, where the light falls exactly the way it did the night she used my mug. The air felt like the inside of a bell. The doorbell rang. I checked the camera. Jessica stood on my porch, holding a white orchid and a clipboard, smiling the smile I once mistook for kindness. Behind her, my grandson bounced, the picture of delight, the coin in his irises catching the sun. I opened the door. Hi, Mom, she said brightly. Just wanted to drop this by. She thrust the clipboard. Estate inventory. We need you to sign off on what you've removed from the main house so our accountant can track the silver, I said. How diligent. And I brought you something beautiful. She lifted the orchid. It thrives on neglect. I prefer my gifts like my relationships, I said. Alive because they are tended. She laughed. Airy. You're funny. I'm observant, I corrected, and let the silence stretch until she blinked. Anyway, she chirped. I also wanted to ask if you could watch Little Ben on Saturday. We have an, family thing with the board at the company and the board, I repeated. I crouched to eye level with the child who wore my husband's gaze, and he patted my cheek with a hand that already knows who tells him the truth. I'd love to watch him, I said to the boy, not to the woman. We'll plant tomatoes and he'll learn that roots are not optional. When I stood, Jessica's phone vibrated. She ignored it. Then, oddly, she didn't. She peeked, paled, swallowed. The mask slipped and for the blink of an instant, I saw the woman beneath, cornered, smart, not kind. She pasted the smile back on. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said too fast. Just logistics. I do love logistics, I murmured. They always leave fingerprints. I signed nothing. She noticed. We really should get this done, she said, tapping the form. We will, I promised. After discovery. Discovery? She tilted her head. In a contest. I smiled the way a cat does when it knows where the mouse sleeps. Of the will. Her lashes fluttered, then stilled. I watched the calculation flit through her. I could almost hear the abacus. She switched weapons. Oh, Sheila. Grief is like a heavy coat. It makes you warm and it makes you clumsy. Grief, I said softly, is exactly like a coat. And I've had worse winters than this. The orchid wobbled between us like a white flag that didn't know what it was. I took it anyway. I'm sentimental and practical like that. Tell the board I said hello, I added. And when you see the accountant, remind him I have questions about 3 transfers the week of the 17th. Color rose in her cheeks, then retreated. Of course. She turned to leave, took 2 steps, and then pivoted back. By the way, she said, breezy again, I'm holding on to the urn a little longer. I think it's therapeutic. For Ben, I echoed, keeping my face a chapel even as my hands wanted to be hammers. Children do love rituals. She left. I closed the door and leaned against it, pressing my spine into the wood until resolve replaced adrenaline. The orchid sat on the console table like an accusation. I watered it with tap water and intention. My phone buzzed. An email from my attorney. Motion drafted. Need to file by Friday to stop Monday's transfer to her holding company. A second ping. A text from Marcus with a grainy photo of a lab report folded in half visible line. Probability of relatedness, 99.99%. I didn't let myself cry. I put the photo in my file, in the blood tab. Then I opened my laptop to send one polite message to the notary, one to the bank investigator, and one to an old friend at the local paper whose appetite for elder exploitation cases has won awards and enemies in equal measure. My finger hovered over the send key when the doorbell chimed again. I checked the camera. This time it wasn't Jessica, it was my son. His jaw was set the way it gets when he's already decided to be wrong. He pounded once more and shouted through the door, loud enough to wake my grandparents' ghosts. Mom, he said, we need to talk, now. And in his eyes, through the peephole's fishbowl, I saw the thing I dreaded, not anger, terror. The kind that arrives when a woman you trust tells you a story about your mother that cannot be true. I opened the door, ready to choose between the 2 hardest loves of my life, the truth and my child. Come in, I said, and the house took a breath with me. He walked in like a thunderstorm, pretending to be a man, loud, charged, and on the edge of collapsing into rain. My son, my sweet, foolish boy who used to collect matchbox cars and now collects lies from women who smile too easily. Jessica told me everything, he said. Everything? I asked, closing the door behind him. That must have taken some time. She's got quite a collection of everythings. He didn't laugh. He never laughs anymore unless someone's watching. He just stood there in the living room, fists jammed in his pockets, the way his father used to stand when he'd spent money we didn't have. She said you're trying to ruin us, he said. That you've hired a lawyer, a detective, that you're spreading stories, crazy ones. That you think she and Dad. He stopped, swallowed. Mom, please tell me you didn't say that. I looked at him and saw my husband's brow, my own mouth, and the shame of generations. Sit, I said gently. He shook his head. No, I am not sitting until you tell me you didn't. He accused my wife of sleeping with Dad. His voice cracked, and for a moment he sounded 12 again. I didn't want to be cruel, but I wasn't going to be quiet either. Tell me, I said, why she had your father's initials on a DNA test 6 months before he died. Tell me why your father changed his will while taking medication that blurred his mind like Vaseline on glass. Tell me why she controls every penny, every key, every urn in this family like a dragon guarding ash. He blinked, confused, then angry. That's insane. She was helping him. You know he trusted her with everything. Oh, I know, I said, folding my arms. I've seen how much he trusted her. Stop, he said sharply. You're talking about my wife, and I'm talking about my husband, I said, louder. They just happen to be the same person's secret. He paled. You have no proof. I have all the proof, I said, and pulled the folder from the drawer under the TV. And I'm filing it with the court this week. He took a step back as if it were a weapon, which in a way it was. Mom, please. You're destroying everything. No, I said. I'm disinfecting it. He dragged his hand down his face. She's been crying all day, he said. She said you hate her, that you've always hated her because she's younger, prettier, that Dad adored her. I laughed, sharp as a crack in glass. Oh, I see, she's expanding her mythology. What's next? That she's the Virgin Mary and the rest of us just didn't notice. Why are you doing this? He shouted. Because she stole my life, I said quietly. And yours? He stared at me, searching for the mother who made him pancakes on Sundays, not the woman now holding evidence like a sword. You've changed, he whispered. No, I said. I've remembered. He turned toward the door. If you go through with this, if you drag her through court, I'll never forgive you. I can live with that, I said, if it means you'll live long enough to see what she really is. He slammed the door behind him, hard enough to rattle the picture frames. The house went still. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the space he'd occupied. There's a kind of grief only mothers know, the grief of watching your child defend the person who is poisoning him. You want to shake him, scream, pull him back, but you can't. You can only set the trap and hope he trips over the truth before it is too late. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the streetlight turn my porch silver. Around midnight, a car I didn't recognize idled in front of the house. Headlights off. I didn't move. After 2 minutes, it rolled away. The next morning, Marcus called. Your daughter-in-law's been busy, he said. She visited the law firm yesterday, met with the same lawyer who handled the will. Damage control, I said. Maybe. But that's not all. She also met with a private investigator. I smiled, slow and dry. She's trying to follow me. She's scared, he said. People do dumb things when they're scared. Good, I said. Let her be scared. She should be. After I hung up, I called my lawyer, Miss Harris. File it, I said. Today. She hesitated. You're sure? Once this goes to court, it's public. Your son will have to pick a side. I'm sure, I said. Let him pick. I'm done being picked over. By afternoon, the challenge to the will was officially lodged. The assets were frozen pending review. Jessica's reign, for the first time, had a crack. I poured myself a glass of wine not for celebration, but for ceremony, and took it out to the porch. The air was clean, almost kind. My phone buzzed. A message from Jessica. You've made a terrible mistake. You don't know what you've started. I replied, oh, I know exactly what I've started, and I plan to finish it. That night, I dreamed of my husband. He was young again, sitting at the workbench, tinkering with some old carburetor, smiling the way he did before ambition ate the softness out of him. I wanted to forgive him. I almost did. But then I woke up and remembered the ashes in her house, and the smile curdled. The next morning, the retaliation began. First, my car tires slashed clean through. Then, an anonymous email to my lawyer claiming I was mentally unwell and under psychiatric care, which, unfortunately for Jessica, was easily disproven by my doctor's office. Petty tactics, desperate fingerprints. But the third move was clever. My bank called to alert me that someone had attempted to move money from my Kansas City account using my husband's old authorization code, one only she and he would know. So she wanted to play thief? Fine. I'd written the book on survival. I went to the bank in person, wearing my best blazer and my calmest smile. The manager, nervous, led me to his office. I laid the situation out like a deck of cards, showing him the attempted transfer. He frowned. That code was recently reactivated. By whom? I asked. He hesitated. It came from the company's financial department, her authorization. I leaned forward. Freeze everything connected to her until this case is resolved. If she tries again, call the police first and me second. When I stepped out of the bank, I felt taller, lighter. I wasn't just defending myself anymore, I was attacking. That night, I drove to my husband's old car company. It hurt, seeing it from the outside. I'd been there from the beginning, filing the permits, answering phones, delivering sandwiches to the mechanics in the heat. Now the gates bore her initials. The new signage gleamed. Marshall Automotive, Inc. President, Jessica M. She'd even taken my name. I parked across the street and just watched the building glow. I could almost hear his voice saying, "It's just business, Sheila." But this wasn't business anymore. This was war. Then my phone buzzed again. Marcus. Got something you should see, he said. Sending you a file. A photo appeared. Jessica, late at night, meeting a man outside a hotel downtown. Not my husband. Not my son. Younger, handsome. They weren't touching, but their distance was electric. She said she had a board meeting tonight, Marcus said. Want me to follow? No, I said, smiling. Let her think she's invisible. We'll save that one for later. When I got home, I printed the picture and slid it into the folder labeled Phase 2. Then I called my lawyer. After the will hearing, I said, I want to press charges for financial fraud. She hesitated. You're serious? Deadly, I said. And speaking of dead, I want that urn. There was silence on the line. Mrs. Marshall, she said finally, what exactly are you planning to do with it? Nothing illegal, I said. Just symbolic. She sighed. I'm not sure I believe that. You shouldn't, I said, and hung up, because the truth was, I didn't want to destroy the urn. Not yet. I wanted to make sure she saw it every day until it meant something else entirely. Until it was no longer her trophy, but her reminder. And I knew just how to do it. I called Marcus back. You still have that friend who makes custom replicas? Sure, he said slowly. Why? I need 2 urns, I said. Identical. One real, one fake. And I need them by next week. He whistled low. Sheila, what exactly are you planning? I smiled, watching the night stretch over Kansas City like a dark velvet curtain. Just a little performance, I said. A family essence of truth. I'll tell you this much about revenge, it's a kind of stagecraft. Timing, lighting, and audience participation. You can't improvise vengeance the way you can an apology. It has to be rehearsed, layered, precise. I was a theater major before life drafted me into motherhood, and those years of memorizing lines turned out to be more useful than any business degree. Marcus delivered the urns a week later. Identical, down to the brass filigree and the faint smell of cedar polish. One holds your husband, he said. The other holds about 5 pounds of barbecue ashes from Joe's smokehouse. Well, I said, he always did love ribs. Marcus laughed. You sure about this? I've been sure since the day she took the first one from me, I said. We met in the garage of my Kansas City cottage, the one my late husband had so generously left to me in his will as though exile was an act of mercy. I lined both urns up on the workbench, studying them. My husband had been a perfectionist. I owed it to him to make the trade perfect. I labeled the fake one with a discreet scratch under the base, my signature, invisible unless you knew where to look. Marcus watched me with that wary respect men reserve for women who've stopped bluffing. You're really going to switch them? Oh, Marcus, I said, smiling. I'm going to do more than switch them. I'm going to let her return him to me with her own hands. He whistled. You scare me sometimes. Good, I said. Fear is a form of respect. The will hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Jessica arrived early, dressed in Grief's designer version black silk blouse, pearl earrings, soft hair waves that whispered widow rather than homewrecker. My son trailed behind her, jaw tight, eyes darting between us like a referee who already knows the score. Mother, she said, sugar melting on her tongue, you look radiant. Kansas City must agree with you. Funny, I said. I was about to say the same about guilt. Her smile wavered, but only slightly. Inside the courthouse, my lawyer, Miss Harris, was already seated, files stacked like fortresses around her. Jessica's counsel was a slick man with a tan that didn't he belong in the Midwest. When he shook my hand, he said, we're hoping to resolve this amicably. Oh, I love that word, I said. It always comes right before someone loses everything. The hearing was procedural, just enough to establish the dispute. The judge listened, expression neutral, while Harris presented our initial evidence, medical records suggesting cognitive decline, prescription notes, the will revision dates, the suspicious proximity of Jessica's involvement. Jessica played her role beautifully, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling when she said, he treated me like a daughter. If the courtroom had a laugh track, I'd have cued it right there. My son sat behind her, not looking at me. Every time she touched his hand, his shoulders loosened a little. She was a puppeteer and my boy was made of string. When it was over, the judge set a date for the full hearing. 6 weeks, long enough for me to build an empire of proof. As we left the courthouse, Jessica caught up to me on the steps. Was that satisfying? She hissed, the sweetness gone. Dragging his memory through the mud? I'm not dragging him, I said. I'm washing him clean. Her eyes flickered with anger. You're pathetic. You're going to die alone in that little house with nothing but your bitterness. I stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the lavender oil on my wrists. You forget, I said softly. I've already lived with worse company, men who smiled while lying. You're just a cheaper copy. She flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. Then she smirked. You think you're clever, but you don't know everything. Probably not, I said. But I know enough to make you sweat. She spun on her heel and stalked down the steps, her heels clicking like gunshots. My son hesitated halfway after her. Mom, he started, voice low. Go with her, I said. You'll need to see this through. He looked confused. See what through? The end of your illusions, I said, and walked away. The next few weeks were a study in patience. Jessica started to unravel, piece by piece. I didn't need to attack. I just nudged. I mailed her an anonymous envelope inside, a single photo, her with my husband at a charity gala 7 years ago. His hand on the small of her back, her eyes bright with the thrill of being untouchable. No note, just the picture. 3 days later, Marcus called. Guess who's been calling every photographer in the city, asking if someone's hacked their archives? Let her panic, I said. She's earned it. Meanwhile, I visited her accountant under the pretext of clarifying estate assets, a nervous little man with dandruff and guilt on his collar. I didn't need him to confess. I just needed him to remember that he'd been complicit in moving money from one account to another under my husband's signature during the months of his cognitive decline. By the time I left, he was sweating like a guilty priest, and I was holding a printout of transactions that would make any jury blink twice. Back home, I tucked the papers into my Phase 2 folder, right beside the photo of her late-night meeting with the handsome stranger. The puzzle was nearly complete, but there was still the matter of the urn. I waited until the anniversary of my husband's death, his memorial, as she liked to call it. Every year she hosted a gathering at the house, invited business partners and neighbors, played the devoted widow. I'd attended the first one out of politeness, but not this time. This year, I had a role to play. I arrived early, under the guise of dropping off flowers for the garden. She wasn't expecting me. Her surprise was delicious. "Sheila," she said, clutching her pearls like I was a ghost. "I didn't think you were coming." "Oh, I wouldn't miss it," I said. "I even brought something." Her eyes darted to the box in my hands, one of the urns. I continued, voice soft and solemn, that perhaps it was time we put him back where he belongs, with family. Her throat moved. "That's thoughtful. I try." She gestured toward the mantel. "You can set it there." I did, gently, watching her the whole time. Her hands twisted in her lap. "Would you mind," I said, "bringing the old urn from your study? I'd like to make sure they match before we light the candle." Her face drained of color. "Oh, I already moved it. It's upstairs," I finished. "I'll help." She hesitated, then nodded tightly. Upstairs, in her over-decorated sitting room, the original urn sat on a shelf, my husband's ashes trapped behind glass and deceit. I reached out, my fingers brushing the lid, and said softly, "You know, he hated this color." She froze. "What? Too showy," I said. "He always said gold was for the insecure." Her lips thinned. "You're trespassing. And you're lying," I said, turning to her. "You think you've won because you buried him in luxury and took everything with his name on it. But what you don't understand, darling, is that some of us don't fight for money. We fight for truth. And truth always finds its way to the surface, ashes or not." She tried to snatch the urn from me. I let her. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Her fingerprints, her panic, her guilt all sealed on that lid. "Be careful," I said, calm as glass. "Wouldn't want to spill him." She glared. "You're insane." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm the kind of insane that keeps receipts." I left her standing there, clutching the urn like a guilty heart, and walked out of the house before she realized the switch had already happened. That night, I sat on my porch, the real urn in my lap, the weight of it both terrible and liberating. I thought of scattering him, maybe over the lake he loved, or maybe just over her manicured garden for irony's sake. But no, not yet. He still had work to do for me, because the hearing was only 3 weeks away, and I intended for him to attend in one form or another. I raised my glass to the quiet sky and whispered, "You made your choices, darling. Now watch me make mine." The cicadas buzzed, the night smelled like thunder, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. You know that strange calm that comes before a tornado, the air to still, the light to golden, the birds to quiet? That was the air in my house the week before the hearing. I'd stopped shaking, stopped second-guessing. My anger had settled into something colder, steadier. Revenge, when done right, is never hot. It's served on ice with perfect presentation. I had the real urn hidden in my garage, tucked behind a box of old Christmas decorations. I couldn't look at it for too long. I'd talk to it sometimes, though. I'd say things like, "You made your choice, Richard," or "She fooled you, didn't she? Just like you thought you were fooling me." Sometimes, when I was feeling theatrical, I'd lift the lid and whisper, "Enjoy the silence, darling." Meanwhile, Jessica was unraveling. Marcus fed me updates like treats. She'd fired her accountant, probably to keep him from talking. She'd been calling the law firm daily, demanding to know what evidence I had. She'd even shown up at my son's work crying, saying she was being framed by his delusional mother. Delusional. That word tickled me. Every woman who's ever seen too much is called that eventually. It has the go-to label when men or girls pretending to be women get scared of what you might do next. My son, poor fool, believed her. I could tell from the one-word texts. Stop, please, enough. He'd stopped calling me mom. It was just Sheila now. But I didn't stop. Because by then, it wasn't about just the affair or the will. It was about every woman who's ever been dismissed, gaslighted, or told to be civil while her own home burns. It was about dignity, and I've always been greedy for that. So I got busy. Miss Harris, my lawyer, had built a wall of evidence that could make a judge weep. The medical charts showing early cognitive impairment, the drug prescriptions, the transfer receipts. And now, thanks to Marcus, we had something even better: the DNA results. The 99.99% match. My husband was not just her lover. He was the biological father of my grandson. The knowledge sat in my chest like an anvil and a bomb at the same time. Heavy, dangerous, final. I didn't plan to use it in court, not yet. That truth was a loaded weapon. I'd keep it holstered until I needed to end the war with one shot. But I did plan one small demonstration, a preview, let's say. A performance for a very limited audience. I invited Jessica to tea. She was suspicious, of course. Tea? She repeated when I called. Yes, I said sweetly. Just you and me. We've been at odds too long. I want to make peace. Silence. Then, cautious curiosity. At your house? Of course. She hesitated, then said, fine. Tomorrow at 2. I set the table like it was a peace summit. Linen napkins, my good china, the set she'd once hinted she wanted after I was gone, and a pot of Earl Grey that could melt metal. On the console, I placed the fake urn, the one she believed held my husband's ashes. I polished it until it gleamed like temptation itself. When she arrived, she was wearing cream, soft, angelic, deceptive. She looked around my little house like it was a crime scene. Nice place, she said. Thank you, I said. Small, but it keeps my soul quiet. She smiled tightly. So, peace? Yes, I said, pouring the tea. Peace. We sat. She talked about my grandson, how he was growing so fast, how he'd started calling her Mommy Jess now. I smiled through my teeth. Then I said, do you ever feel haunted? She blinked. Excuse me? By him, I said softly. Richard. I feel him everywhere, especially when the wind hits that urn just right. Her hand stiffened on her cup. Oh, don't look so startled, I went on. I'm not one of those women who believes in ghosts. I just think sometimes what's buried doesn't stay buried. She set the cup down. You invited me here to threaten me? Not threaten, I said. Educate. I stood and walked to the console. You know, I realized something funny. The ashes, you've kept them for so long. I almost thought you'd grown attached. Her throat worked. He wanted me to have them. Of course he did, I said. You were his favorite project. Her eyes flashed. You're disgusting. No, I said, turning with the urn in my hands. I'm prepared. And before she could react, I loosened the lid and tipped the ashes slightly, just enough for a puff of gray dust to bloom between us. She screamed an honest, unpolished sound. Oh, relax, I said, setting it down. That one's fake, but I wanted you to see how easy it would be to scatter the real thing. Her chest heaved. You're insane. Probably, I said, but I'm an organized insane. She stood up, grabbed her purse. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, smiling. But you'll regret more. She stormed out, slamming the door. The sound rattled my teacups and thrilled my bones. Marcus called that evening, laughing so hard he nearly choked. What did you do to her? Why? I asked innocently. She's been calling everyone in a panic. Said you threatened to destroy evidence of a sacred bond. I snorted. I merely demonstrated gravity. He chuckled. You're terrifying. I'm thorough, I corrected. There's a difference. The night before the court hearing, my son showed up at my door again. No warning, no text, just stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. Mom, he said quietly, I don't know what to believe anymore. That's a start, I said. Doubt is healthier than denial. He came inside, looked around like the house was foreign territory. She says you're trying to ruin her life. I'm trying to restore mine, I said. He sighed. He broke off. Ben's the only thing keeping us together. He's the best part of her. My stomach turned, but I didn't let it show. He's innocent, I said softly. None of this is his fault. He nodded. Then don't hurt him. I would never hurt that boy, I said. But I will protect him from lies. He looked at me, something flickering behind his eyes. Maybe suspicion, maybe realization. You're planning something. I smiled. Always. He didn't press. He just hugged me quick, uncertain, and left. I watched him go, a knot tightening in my chest. He had no idea how deep this betrayal ran, but he would, soon. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the fridge and the heartbeat in my chest. I made coffee, dressed in my best navy suit, and opened the garage. There it was, the real urn, waiting like a co-conspirator. I placed it gently in a tote bag and drove to the courthouse. The hearing room was crowded this time. The press had gotten wind of it. Jessica was radiant in black again, her performance rehearsed to perfection. My son sat beside her, hands clasped, expression carved from confusion. When the judge entered, I stood, calm, steady, ready. Miss Harris began. Your Honor, we are presenting evidence today that Mr. Richard Marshall was not of sound mind when he revised his will. Furthermore, we have reason to believe that undue influence was exerted by his daughter-in-law, Mrs. Jessica Marshall. Jessica shifted, her mask twitching. Harris continued, laying out the documents, the prescriptions, the doctor's notes, the transaction list, each piece of brick in the wall I'd built around her. Finally, she handed the judge a photo, the one of Jessica and my husband at that gala. Taken 7 years ago, she said, around the time Mr. Marshall began transferring assets to accounts later linked to Mrs. Marshall. A murmur rippled through the room. Jessica's lawyer objected, sputtering about privacy and circumstantial evidence. The judge overruled him. Jessica looked at me then, truly looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear, not the strategic kind, but the kind that comes from knowing the game is over. When the hearing adjourned, she brushed past me, whispering, "You regret this. You're playing with things you don't understand." I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, "I understand perfectly. You're the one who doesn't know who the father of your child is." Her eyes widened, just for a second. Then she was gone. Miss Harris touched my arm. "You shouldn't have said that." "I know," I said, but I couldn't stop smiling. It felt too good not to, because now, she knew that I knew. And there is nothing more dangerous to a liar than a woman with the truth and time to use it. That night, I went home and poured a drink. I set the urn on the table, looked at it, and said, "You're coming with me to the finale." The storm wasn't over, but it was close, and I've always loved a good ending. The next few days moved like molasses and lightning all at once. You know that peculiar rhythm when you're calm on the outside, but inside your blood is clapping its hands in applause? That was me. My son wasn't speaking to me. Jessica's lawyer had filed 3 motions to delay, and the gossip mill was spinning so fast you could have powered Kansas City with it. But I didn't care. I'd already won something bigger than money. Her fear. Every predator has a tell, and hers was vanity. She could handle anger. She could even handle exposure, but fear? That made her sloppy. She stopped sleeping. Marcus told me she'd started checking her rearview mirror every few seconds, like guilt had taken up jogging behind her. She changed her phone number twice. She even hired a new babysitter for Ben, for safety. Safety from what? Herself, perhaps. Then one evening, I got a message. It was from my son. "Meet me at Dad's workshop. Tomorrow, noon, alone." I almost didn't go. Part of me thought it was a setup, Jessica luring me into some melodramatic confrontation. But another part, the mother part, couldn't resist. My son had reached out. Maybe finally, he was ready to listen. The workshop was where my husband used to tinker. He'd built engines there, fixed radios, repaired clocks, things that were broken but didn't want to be. I parked and saw my son standing by the door, hands in his pockets. He looked older than his years. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time in months. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. "Of course," I said. "What's this about?" He hesitated, then said, "She's losing it, Mom. She keeps saying you're trying to ruin her. She's terrified. She barely eats. She cries every night. I don't even recognize her." "Good," I said. He flinched. "You can't enjoy this." "Oh, but I can," I said, because I lived it in reverse. For 7 years I smiled through her little performances. Now she gets to smile through mine. He shook his head. "You don't understand. I love her." I sighed. "You love the idea of her, the woman she showed you, the one she rehearsed." He turned toward the workbench, running his fingers along the tools. "Dad loved her too, didn't he?" The air stopped moving. I didn't answer. "That's what this is really about," he said. "You can't forgive him." I walked closer, slow, deliberate. No, son, I can't forgive betrayal, especially when it's repeated through generations. He frowned. What does that mean? Nothing, I said quickly. You don't need to know yet. Yet? Go home, sweetheart, I said softly. Take care of Ben. That's the only thing that matters now. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He left. I waited until his car disappeared, then stepped inside the workshop. It smelled like oil and ghosts. I sat on the old stool by the bench and ran my hand over the scratches carved into the wood. My husband had etched initials there years ago, ours, the kids. And then, faintly, Timur, R+J. That was the moment I decided how it would end. 3 days before the next hearing, Jessica called me. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity has always been my weakness. Sheila, she said, her voice tight, we need to talk, please, for Ben's sake. I let the silence stretch until it hummed. Fine, my place. Tomorrow? And Jessica? Yes, come alone. When she arrived, she looked brittle. Her beauty had sharpened into something thin, desperate. She'd lost the halo and kept the horns. I can't take this anymore, she said, the moment she stepped inside. The whispers, the looks, the lawyers. You've poisoned everything. I just told the truth, I said. It's not my fault if it's toxic. She slammed her purse on the table. You want the company? Take it. You want the house? I'll sign it over. Just stop this insanity. I tilted my head. You're offering me everything? Yes. How generous, I said, almost as if it isn't yours to offer. Her lips parted. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been playing chess with stolen pieces, I said, and reached for the file on the counter. You remember this? I opened it and slid the DNA report across the table. Recognition probability, 99.99%. She stared at it, then at me, comprehension dawning like a bruise. You wouldn't, she whispered. Oh, I would, I said, if I have to, but I don't want to. I don't want to humiliate my son or my grandson. I want you to admit what you did to me, right here, right now. Her face drained of color. I won't, she said finally, voice trembling. You can't prove anything in court. Maybe not, but I can prove it to him, I said softly. To your husband, to the man who thinks Ben is his son. Her composure cracked. She lunged for the file, but I was faster. I held it just out of reach. Tell me, Jessica, I said, when you were sleeping with my husband, did you ever stop to think what that would do to your child? To raise him surrounded by ghosts? Stop, she screamed. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me, I said, voice low. Make me understand. She was shaking now, tears streaming down that perfectly powdered face. He promised he'd leave you, she said. He said you were cold, that you didn't love him anymore. He said I was the only thing that made him feel alive. I nodded slowly. And when he didn't leave me, her mouth twisted. He said he would, eventually, I repeated. A lovely word for cowards. She collapsed into the chair, sobbing. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I loved him. I still do. I watched her fall apart, and I'll be honest, I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. She'd played the martyr for too long. Jessica, I said quietly, you're going to end this. You're going to withdraw from the company, the estate, all of it. You're going to tell the court that you manipulated a sick man into changing his will. And you're going to do it before I have to tell my son why his son has his grandfather's eyes. Her head snapped up. You can't. I can, I said, and I will. You think I care what people say about me? I'm 60, darling. Reputation is a luxury for the young. I care about truth. She stood abruptly, shaking her head. If you do this, you'll destroy him, both of them. I know, I said, but at least they'll be destroyed by the truth, not by a lie. She stared at me, breathing hard. You're a monster. I smiled sadly. No, dear, I'm a mother. She left without another word. I watched her car speed off, taillights bleeding into the night. The next morning, I called Miss Harris. We might not need the hearing after all, I said. She's about to fold. Harris sounded skeptical. If she does, it'll be to save herself, not to help you. I don't care why, I said, as long as she signs. But Jessica didn't show up at the courthouse. Not that day, not the next. Her lawyer called instead, voice clipped. My client is indisposed. She's seeking treatment out of state. Treatment, I repeated. Yes, he said. Exhaustion. That word again. The rich woman's flu. Send me the papers, I said. I'll sign them when she does. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table. hands wrapped around my coffee mug, and for the first time in months, I felt tired. Not defeated, just human. The urn sat on the counter, watching me. I thought about scattering the ashes again, but no, there was still one thing left to do. Because I knew Jessica's type. She wouldn't disappear quietly. She'd wait, lick her wounds, and then come back when she thought I'd grown soft again. So I needed to make sure she never came back. I picked up the phone and called Marcus. "You still have that contact at the Kansas City Gazette?" I asked. "I do," he said slowly. "Why?" "Because I think the world deserves to know how a grieving widow seduced her father-in-law and stole $12 million in assets from a man with dementia. Don't you?" He was quiet. "Sheila, that's nuclear." "Good," I said. "Let's light it up." He sighed. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. Because revenge isn't complete when you win. It's complete when your enemy knows they've lost. And I wanted Jessica to know. I wanted her to see her name in print, to watch her perfect life burn in the court of public opinion. And when the article came out front page, full spread, with my late husband's name, her photo, and every sordid detail, I didn't flinch. I just poured myself another cup of coffee, turned on the radio, and listened to the sound of justice echo through Kansas City. But I wasn't done yet, because one day later, my doorbell rang, and this time, it wasn't the press. It was my son, and he was holding the newspaper. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "what have you done?" I looked at him, and for once, I didn't lie. "Saved you," I said. But from his face, I could tell he didn't believe it yet. He would. Oh, he would. He didn't sit down right away. He just stood in the doorway, clutching that newspaper like a weapon he didn't know how to use. His knuckles were white, his jaw tight. I'd seen that same expression the day he broke his first toy car because it wouldn't do what he wanted. Some things, it seems, never change. "Mom," he said again, quieter this time, "you destroyed her." I took my time answering. I poured a cup of coffee, added cream, stirred. The small domestic ritual steadied me. "No," I said finally. "She destroyed herself. I just handed her the mirror." He threw the paper onto the table. The headline screamed between us. "Business heiress Jessica Marshall exposed in shocking estate scandal." Underneath, smaller print, "DNA results suggest deceased founder's daughter-in-law bore his child." My son's face was pale. "Ben will see this someday," he said. "Yes," I said softly, "and he'll know the truth of where he came from. Not the fairy tale she would have fed him." He looked at me with something raw in his eyes, anger, grief, confusion. "How could you do this to him? He's just a kid." "Because lies don't protect children," I said, my voice shaking despite myself. "They just delay the damage. And when it hits later, it hits harder. I lived through that once. I won't live through it again." He rubbed his forehead. "You could have come to me first." "Oh, sweetheart," I said gently. "You wouldn't have listened. You were still in love with the actress." His eyes darkened. "She wasn't acting. Everyone's acting," I said. "Some of us are just better at remembering our lines." He sank into the chair across from me, exhaling like someone carrying too much weight. "She's gone," he said finally. "She took Ben and left the state. I don't know where. No one does." I felt something cold move through me, like a draft under a locked door. "She won't get far," I said. "She's too vain to vanish completely." "She's talking about suing you," he said. I smiled faintly. "Let her. My lawyer's already drafted her response for her." He stared at me. "Do you even care what this has done to us?" "Of course I care," I said. "But caring doesn't mean surrendering." He looked at me for a long time, searching my face for the mother he used to know, the one who kissed scraped knees and packed lunches. "She's still here," I wanted to tell him. "She's just wearing armor now." When he spoke again, his voice was small. "You used to tell me revenge was a poison." "It is," I said. "But sometimes you need a dose of it to survive the infection." He shook his head, stood, and walked toward the door. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said without turning around. I took a sip of my coffee. "I'm not asking you to," I said. "Just remember who warned you." He left, and the silence that followed was thick enough to chew. I looked at the paper on the table, the photo of her perfect smile, and for a moment I felt nothing. Not triumph, not regret, just the quiet emptiness that comes after the last note of a symphony. A week later, the phone rang. It was Marcus. "You sitting down?" he asked. "I'm always sitting when there's gossip," I said. "She's in the news again. Took off with the kid, tried to cross into Canada, but the border patrol flagged her." They had an alert from the estate hearing assets under investigation. She's in custody pending fraud charges. I let out a long breath. Alive? Very. And furious. She told reporters you're a sociopath. Well, I said, smiling. Everyone needs a hobby. He chuckled. The DA's opening an inquiry into the will now that the medical reports are public. Looks like you're going to get your house and the company back. I don't want the company, I said. Let it rot. I'll sell it for parts if I have to. But the house, yes. I'll take the house. What about your son? Marcus asked quietly. What about him? He's in the middle of all this. I know, I said, my throat tight. He'll come around. Or he won't. Either way, he'll learn what kind of woman raised him. There was a pause. You did it, Sheila. You really did it. I told you, I said. I don't bluff. After we hung up, I walked out to the porch. The evening light was soft, the sky bleeding from gold to violet. I carried the urn with me, the real one, my husband's ashes. I'd been keeping him too long. I could feel it, the weight of him, the ghost of him. It was time. I took the urn down to the garden, to the small patch where the roses still bloomed wild despite my neglect. I opened the lid, and for a moment, I hesitated. Do you know what you did? I whispered. You broke me open and made me rebuild myself sharper. You loved her, and it cost you everything. You lied to me, and it cost you your soul. But I'll say this much, you gave me one last gift, clarity. The wind picked up, lifting the ashes like smoke. They scattered over the roses, over the grass, over the life that would go on without him. Goodbye, Richard, I said. You got the ending you deserved. I stood there until the last of him was gone, then brushed my hands clean and went back inside. 2 months later, the court ruled in my favor. The will was voided, the assets returned to me, and the estate divided properly between the children. Jessica was officially charged with fraud and coercion. My son didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't blame him. I moved back into the house not out of nostalgia, but to reclaim it. I stripped the place of her furniture, her curtains, her scent. I hired painters to cover the walls in fresh white, clean as a page waiting for new words. The last thing I unpacked was a framed photo of my grandson. He was grinning, cheeks smeared with chocolate. I set it on the mantel where the urn once stood. That night, I sat alone in the quiet house, glass of wine in hand, and allowed myself a smile, not of glee, of peace. Because revenge, when it's done right, isn't about rage, it's about restoration. It's about standing in the ruins and realizing you built yourself stronger. The phone rang once more. It was my son. Mom? He said softly. Yes, honey? I just wanted to tell you, she confessed. Everything. You were right. I know, I said. Silence. Then hesitantly, I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. So am I. Can we start over? He asked. I smiled through the tears that finally came. We can always start over. When I hung up, I looked out at the garden where the roses swayed in the night breeze. They were blooming brighter than ever. Maybe that's how life works. You prune away the rot, and what's left finds its way to the sun. And that, my dear listeners, is how a 59-year-old woman named Sheila reminded the world that betrayal may cut deep, but wisdom cuts cleaner. I lost a husband, a home, and the illusion of safety, but I gained something better, myself. So if you are listening and someone is trying to write you out of your own story, don't you dare hand them the pen. Pick it back up. Write your own ending. Make it memorable. Because forgiveness is overrated. But dignity? That's forever.